I think everybody straighten out their posture, and we're recording. So Ramona, do you mind if I get straight into these work plan and assessments and kind of like that? Is that okay?
We can go for it.
Yeah. So the last time when we talked a couple of weeks ago, we were okay. It'd be nice if I shared the screen, instead of hogging it. Okay. So we were talking about this survey that we've been working on, and I wanted, and that was sort of our next step to finalize these questions. We have these categories, and to just put that into context, after that, we would kind of like to conduct pilot assessment of change management capabilities for a specific business process. So this is a list of utility partners, and these are the processes that they decided on that they would focus on. So Kansas City is going to do water main replacement, as-built submittal and approval process, which is at the back end of the CIP planning. And DC Water is focusing on business case evaluation for CIP, which is all the way at the front end of the CIP planning and execution process. So these assessment for change management are here, where this is intended to be sort of just like a schedule overall dashboard for all the work that's going to be going, when it would start and complete. But before we get to change management assessment, there are a couple of assessments, tier 1 on people side, and tier 2, which is workforce organizational culture, that people could take on. And there's also a process and technology assessment that looks at how much we know about the processes, how complex they are, and stuff like that. And the idea was that people would say, okay, I'm going to go start this on this date and complete it on this date. So these are just assessments. And okay, I'll correct this. Anyway. I know what happened, but once people select the process, they're going to want to develop an as-is model and to be. And you can see that Kansas City and DC Water have already done this. So it would really be the best place to start. And then when they have a description of these business process models in place, they will know who's involved, who all the stakeholders are, what the decisions are that they need to be made, what artifacts, what technologies are used, and stuff like that. And then before they get into this improvement steps, that's where change management is going to come in, because on the upper part is where the change management is. So when we complete this assessment, it would really integrate change management with project management. But for the project management, we'll have to find out the scope and all that. So I'm just going to show you, I think an example will be helpful. So what we're talking about is on the process and technology side, we're going to do this on the people side. I've shown you we're doing this with Power BI and with Microsoft Forms, because it's intended to be a survey that goes to individual people, and we find out how people feel. But here we're looking at what are people actually doing rather than how they feel. It's a substantial difference. So this would be really intended to support meetings, workshops, and so forth. And that's there, and it would be completely transparent and open. So it would be just in a spreadsheet, and then we're going to bolt on Power BI to look at all these assessments. So just to go show you an example on the processes, there's going to be something to identify the stakeholders. I'm glad that Deborah joined us just at this point. So you see, Deborah, we included identifying the stakeholders, and then talk about business process scope, and these are different tabs. So when you would go here, you would see, let me zoom in a little bit, you would figure out what the scope of the process is, whether it's how many people are involved, everybody across the organization, or just a specific job, a person in a single small business unit. And then what's the impact? Is the impact, I don't know, to no impact? If it's, I don't know, that's, an issue. And if it's no impact, then it's, you'd get a different color. So the idea is that we're going to have an overview of what the processes are, and also about technology. So on the data collection level and generation, we're going to ask questions such as, what is the authoritative source for this data? What data do you require? What's the authoritative source? So I don't want to get too much into the detail. We're dealing with this with the technology team. So I'm building something right now that's equivalent to that for the change management. And we have, therefore, these tabs for the questions that we have talked about and looked at, and we had that mural session and we looked at them in spreadsheets. So I wanted to show how this will eventually look like, so that when we look at leadership and vision, we will have those questions, and then there'll be answers here. And if you say, I don't know, it'll turn red. And if you say, I strongly agree, it will be green. So we start getting a map of how we're doing in these different categories. And then we're going to have a dashboard that shows for each one of these categories. Then we'll see, what the situation looks like. So I'm going to just say this, by a combination, our goal is to then really finalize this, and people will have the next 2 weeks to look in there and make comments. We've received some comments right now. We have to also keep in mind, right now we have 28 of these questions, and we probably don't want to add too many more to this. So I'm going to stop now and see if people have any questions or thoughts on this, because ultimately what we're going to try to see is, right now for Baltimore, I have procurement process. If that is still the case, and you'd like to still like to do that, we're going to go ahead and meet with people. The project team is going to meet with people from DPW and create a plan for how to involve the process people and the technology people and the change management people and so forth. So our intention is to have individual conversations with each utility to tailor this map to something that really fits their desired scope and priorities and so forth. So I'm going to stop now and see Scott has his hand up.
I just wanted to just put it a different way, is that we have these other teams, for energy and CIP and people and technology. And what they're doing is identifying improvements. A lot of those selected business processes that are listed here are there, but they're going through a process and identifying improvements. And aside from what people on this particular call and part of the change management team might want to do, these others are waiting in effect, for us to finish our change management work, to have the change management assessment finished so that they can apply change management to all the processes that they're going to be improving. It also happens that we have, I see Deborah on the call, and we have Baltimore, and actually Alice, we need to get your item down there too for Portland BES. But there are plans to you know, to move forward as a pilot. But as Cello said, in order to do that with this team, we're setting up individual meetings with each utility by utility by utility in order to develop a tailored plan that's going to work for the particular business process area that people want to improve.
So I will say for Baltimore, we are ready to put our team together for procurement so that we can start the training and start to look at how we do the business process modeling. I've talked to Joseph, and he's excited for us to actually, you know, look at what our as is state. And I think our as is state might be a diagram that goes like this. So it's difficult right now for us to procure anything. We've got so many obstacles. So I think it's going to be exciting for us to actually define what our as is state is. It's very, very complicated, and I think we can pare it down so that we can get some things and we can document so we have a good understanding of what needs to be done. So I think we're excited to, on the procurement side, to start developing that team. And getting our fiscal folks are excited about jumping in and being part of that. So we have reached out to some of the stakeholders to get them involved. And I think this will be a good opportunity for us to go through this systematically, do the training, do the people assessments for the folks that are within this process, and just follow the process.
That's fantastic.
So that we can get it completed.
That's fantastic. From personal experience, I can tell you that when I was at the Water District, we a couple of years ago, on one project, we had to get approval for external consultant to get into on our network, on our intranet network, and it took 4 months. And then I asked for this, and we had a delay on the project. So I asked one of my engineers to map out the process for just giving permission to an external consultant to get into our network. And it barely fit on an 11 by 17. And when we showed it to people, they said, really? This is what we're doing? Because everybody saw just their own little piece. But when they saw the whole thing, they said, this doesn't make any sense. But they've been doing it without, they knew that I get a piece of paper from this person, and I, stamp it and sign it, and I send it to this person. But when they saw it going, like you described, like a dryer for clothes, just going in circles and tumbling, they were all really surprised. So that's a very realistic. And I highlighted a Portland BES thing because this was the process that the energy team defined, Alice, and this was actually BES team. They wanted to map out the process for condition assessment of pumps and motors. And what's interesting is that this is on the energy team, and on our asset management and asset risk team, that team is focusing on pumps and motors and asset management. So it would be wonderful to have all these pieces come together, just like Ramona described, on a process. And so it's not we're trying to fix the universe, but just focus on.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you were able to talk to that team, and I'll check in with them too.
Yeah, it's Josh and Brittany and Leo. Yeah.
Great,
so
thanks.
So that's really where we'd like to go. And I noticed that Deborah had a thing in the chat line. but I didn't see the chat. Deborah, what was your question?
I was just asking, has any utility tackled calculating min-max levels with either your L&M or your warehouse team or whoever's over getting components, raw materials, parts, that type of stuff?
No, we have not. Nobody,
then-
we have not
Okay.
done that yet.
And then I have one more question. I was getting ready to type it. It's to Ramona. We did a lot of work with our procurement team a couple years ago, and I was on that team. And we have a SOP and SWI manual. And I don't know if you just looking at ours, would that help your effort, or would that be too much for you to take in?
No, absolutely. I will look at anything that anyone has, I have no problem in taking portions of anything that works and not reinventing it and saying, oh, this looks like we can plug it into what we do to improve what we're doing. So no, there is no ego in us trying to reinvent this thing. As long as we can plug it into our policies, procedures, and our city charter,
Yeah.
I'm excited to take anything you have that I can look at.
Okay, because we redid our policy. Again, I was on that team, and it took almost a good year and some change to do the policy. And it probably took us about 2 years to get all these SOPs kind of worked out with various processes. So I'm very proud to have been on that team. It's really great. And now I've been asked to try to wrap our arms around min-max levels, because what's happening is a lot of our team is frustrated with going to the warehouse to get components and parts, and it's always either empty or not enough to accomplish the job. So that's going to be a huge undertaking, but we're doing a pilot in a couple of areas, and I think that's going to be some real valuable information as well, especially with a lot of lead times being adjusted during this pandemic. We've lost a little bit of control.
Yeah, I think we have someone in our organization who that is one of her biggest struggles, Ingrid. And I'll try and get Ingrid engaged because she's struggling. We can't keep supplies in our storehouses. We just can't. And it's between the process, not being forgiving, and lead times, like you said, on supply chain, she's just struggling. So that would be great for her to see what you guys are putting in place.
Okay, because I think both of the projects that I've mentioned would work really well, because especially the min-max, because we're just getting organized and starting to pull data and try to figure out who, like the stakeholders, who does this affect? How does it affect them? Where, what, when, how? And so that I would like to do both of those, because we are really, really out of control with these components, and just coming up with the definition for critical and trying to wrap our arms around how do we prioritize critical components when everything is critical in certain people's eyes. So we've really worked hard on getting a definition for critical, asking key questions, and building a matrix to make sure everybody understands what critical means to the organization when looking at the wastewater versus water. So I think this would also be a good project for us to kind of follow through this process.
That's excellent. And what I am showing now is from our previous effort on UAIM, when we were still with the Water Research Foundation. We created space where people can share their artifacts.
Okay.
And this was on the asset management related. So you can see that different places put different organizations posted different things that they use and shared it with others. For example, this was their asset management policy. This was a balanced scorecard. This was asset management plan. this was a asset management plan development flow chart and stuff like that. A copy of a strategic asset management plan. You could see from Portland Water that they put in workflows, and they even put this is very interesting one, where they have a document which is guidelines for developing an asset management plan. And I've shown this before. It has 53 pages, and it's really fill in the blanks for an asset management plan. It may not be 100%. You can look at the table of contents, asset profile and introduction, definition, purpose, levels of service, inventory and valuation, failure modes and asset life, business risk exposure, likelihood of failure, consequence of failure. And if you go down, you will see that, for example, let's say purpose, and it says define the purpose and gives you a couple of examples, one for distribution mains, one for valves and gates, talks about levels of service. So these are the type, and workload measures. So these are the types of documents that are then very helpful for others who are working on related things. So I will set up a folder for on the OneDrive under change management. So whatever you feel is related to, if, for example, I can create a folder for each of the processes that we're looking at. So one for, managing gas cylinders, one from procurement process, for condition assessment of pumps and motors, so that participating utilities can post their artifacts there, just like what you were describing, Deborah, and everybody else can say, oh, okay. So that kind of peer-to-peer sharing we found to be very useful.
I got one more, and then I'm gonna stop talking. I've been doing a lot of projects this year, and another one I think that this team could benefit from. I have a 5S project, but it's very different than a traditional 5S project. We're doing it digitally. So we working with our legal team, because everybody knows legal has a gazillion documents and contracts and legal battles that they have to fight for our organizations. So we're 5S'ing their files, their documents. We're helping them with naming convention, folder structure, archiving old documents, and making sure that everybody kind of names them the same, so that when it's time to search and find things, we want to get them down to 5 clicks or less, and spend less than a minute searching for documents. And that would say, for example, you might need a contract, you might need emails, you might need all this. We want to have it less than a minute to find all the related documents to a particular case.
Yeah, well, I think what you're talking about is something called content management, and so that's, if I'm guessing correctly, that's what you mean by 5S. Is that correct?
Yeah, 5S is a Lean Six Sigma tool or methodology that typically is like in manufacturing or in a office environment, and we just took the concepts of it and applied it to the workspace in terms of folder structure, all the files they were saving, because they were having a lot of files that needed to be deleted, removed, renamed, and so that's what we're doing. So maybe it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's similar, and I'm sure it extended to different media, like from paper to electronic information, and maybe what is often a big hindrance in asset management efforts is the taxonomy and nomenclature. If a valve has a different name in your as-built drawing, a different name in your SCADA system, a different name, different name in your computerized maintenance system, in your warehouse, it's kind of difficult to get things going. So these are that's a bit of a monster problem, actually. And one of the things that makes that kind of problem very difficult, that it's difficult to find who owns it, because it's really an enterprise-wide, an organization-wide issue. And the organization is broken up in such way that so what you're describing would be helpful to everybody. But it's also difficult to find one person, unless it's the person at the very top, that actually has the sphere of influence over every component of it. So for an effort like that, I assume you had strong and hope that you had strong support from the top leadership.
Well, this one is a pilot. We're doing it
Okay.
in the legal first.
Oh,
And
I
yes,
see.
we did have to get, I always try to get executive sponsorship because it just makes my project go much smoother
Yeah,
when you have, some executive leadership and you have someone to kind of remove obstacles and what have you. And the reason why we use the term 5S is because that's an initiative that people are starting to slowly get familiar with. And so, yes, we are tackling that beast slowly, and then we will read across the organization once we work out the bugs in the legal group.
yeah. I managed a project to implement what's called e-discovery system, because in litigation they are required to provide all the related documents to certain topics for legal. The cost of the software license for the product we ended up using was over $1 million.
Oh wow!
It's a beast. It's I don't know how much your organization gets sued, but it's a monster. Anyway, so this is really good discussion. So what I'd like to say is, the proposal we discussed, project team, with Ramona, is that instead of trying to fine tune every question in the instrument that we have right now, for maturity of change management or resistance to change management, the proposal is to maybe just go with what we have now and implement the comments that people have made so far. And then when people have a chance to implement it, we can see if they had issues with implementation. So in the next generation of this assessment, we can make these improvements, because we're concerned. I think Ramona and I and the project team, not me, just Scott, and had concerns that if we keep fine tuning and finding consensus among 30 people of what's the best question, number 14, it will be a little bit challenging. But one exception to this is if you could, at least if everybody could just look at it and look for fatal flaws. So if you see, okay, this issue is not addressed, but if you'd like to do that, it would be perhaps useful for you to also see what the questions are on the people side, because the people, we have issues about a whole bunch of issues there, the questions that would be asked in that part, so we don't duplicate the questions. So 2 asks is, for if you could, we should set up a time to meet for the project team with individual utilities and the teams to get this going. So just if instead of me sending email invitations to everybody, just send me an email and say, yeah, we're ready to go. We have a team in place, and we'll organize a working session to get going. And
not on the assessment, but you're on the like procurement, for example.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. On the focus of the business process, you'd say, okay, we chose the managing gas cylinders, and then Deborah's going to call me and say, well, this is our team. Let's get together. And then we'll say, okay, let's figure out what the documentation is. What do we need to do on that? And we'll lead and help people through the steps and the structure. And in the meantime, we're going to get prepared and spruce up the change management assessment tool. But if you find some fatal flaws there, just let me know. But if it's just a kind of a minor thing or not everything is included, maybe we can hold off on it until we actually try it. But if you see something that's really troubling, then let us know and we'll fix it.
Hello, maybe you want to just briefly describe when, at what stage of the process would the change assessment be used?
Yes, the other assessments are happening. I'm sorry, I'm trying to manage too many windows at the same time. The other assessments for business process and technology or people can happen at the very beginning. But the first we have to look at the business process to identify who is involved and stuff like that. After we have these things in place, after we understand who's involved and we have some sort of a business process model, then when we get to the stage of planning improvements and conducting improvements, that's when the change management is going to come into play. Because we can't start talking about change management before we know who's even involved, what is it that what the change is, because we would prefer to ask question, how would you respond to this change? Not like how would you respond to the change in general, because it would be a lot easier and more doable if it's a specific change, because if we just say, are you comfortable with change? The answer is no, people are not comfortable with change, basically. But are you comfortable with us changing the procurement procedure? Oh, well, that's a different question. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so are there any questions or comments?
No, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to list all of our stakeholders for DPW, Baltimore City DPW procurement, and we're going to build our team, and then we can go ahead and start the business process modeling training.
Yes.
So that we can actually document what it is right now.
That would be fantastic. Any others? I will post, let me just write a note. I will post a link to the folder that will have a number of subfolders. And these subfolders are going to be the business processes that we're looking at. So there'll be a subfolder for managing gas cylinders. There'll be a subfolder for procurement. So I'm going to send it to all the members of this team. So if anybody has things related to, like Deborah said, we have, some really cool stuff on the procurement side, just dump it in there, because so when Ramona and her team address it, they can find these examples there. But it will be in a folder that's related to the business process, so we don't, sorry, Scott.
One just comment, for Ramona, is that that's fantastic that you're saying, okay, who needs to be involved and who are the stakeholders and everything for that process. What we're doing is, with individual meetings, is ahead of dealing with that larger project team, dealing with, let's say, a core team of people to really talk about planning for the entire process, so that, how are you going, here are the steps, here are the tools, here is, and how are you going to be conducting the as is and the to be and the assessment of for business process and technology and people, and kind of work out the make sure that there's a tailored common understanding of how you want to do that for procurement, which doesn't involve every stakeholder to be part of that meeting.
Right,
You
right.
know, so, you know, for others, you know, as you're thinking, and Deborah, we would want to get together with you and whoever else would be, you know, really key in helping to facilitate and to use the specific tools, become familiar with the tools so that you can use them within your organization.
That would be great, because yeah, I feel like I got so many balls up in the air. I don't know if I'm clear on anything. I'm
Yeah.
just, you know, it's this whole saying that my old mentor used to say years ago when I was like in my 20s. The reward of a good job is another job, right? And so it
That's
seems
right.
like I've done some good jobs and now I'm just dumped with a whole bunch of stuff. So any help you guys can provide, I'm open. I need it. I welcome it. It's amazing. So, because yeah, I'm swamped right now.
Well, yeah, the only way to get out of that mode is to start screwing up, you know, then you'll have a little bit more time to rest after that.
Oh no. Yeah, no. I wish.
Some people have perfected this game, I've seen, you know. So anyway, are there other things that we should discuss today? Any questions? Because I think we're all eager to roll up our sleeves and get to something real, and you know, make some good case studies and you know, bring value to each individual utility.
We have a little bit of work to do, just, I mean, very little to at least get a working tool for change management. But we have an assessment in effect for change management, for people, for process, for technology. And it's the exciting time when we can now, let's go apply all of this and make the improvements that we want to make. So, you know, we've spent a lot of years actually developing all this stuff. And now we're in the application mode, so which is a very exciting stage for WISE project.
And I did not forget Ramona's comment and guidance that we need to eat our own dog food and have a business process laid out for change management. I'm working on it. It's not there yet, but it is another thing, so that when somebody new comes in, this group is going to be able to get and learn this organically, but we also have to codify this in a document, and so that it's all clear and mapped out. We're working on it in our copious spare time, and but I have not forgotten about this, Ramona, just so you know.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I'm really excited to get started on our procurement, because it's been really a stumbling block for us. And we've
You
just
know,
got a lot of legacy habits that we've got to break.
you know, I used to work in IT departments and was leading, and I was so grateful for procurement, because that was the only thing that people hated more than IT. So, you know, I was always happy that they're there. But it's a tough problem. It's kind of on the level, not quite, but sort of on the level of what content management, what Deborah was talking about. That's a scary one, because you're kind of getting into everybody's socks. If you want to do it right, you got to get in everybody's socks. So the potential for turbulence is high.
Yes. Yes.
Have you experienced that, Deborah?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
That the content management, that the effort is difficult, because it touches so many different people in so many different parts of the organization. If you're doing it just for legal to start with, even that is difficult. But to do it on the organizational level, it makes it very complex, especially when people feel like it's their data.
Right.
And that there's not a clear owner for the enterprise data. Nobody
Correct.
speaks for the enterprise.
Yeah, it's hard because that's why we're doing these small pilots in different areas so we can work out. To me, pilots are safer so you can understand how the emotion of change is gonna, take place. Because
Yeah.
we have a lady in legal, she has documents from the late 90s, and she is like so nervous about even just archiving them, let alone deleting them or moving them around or renaming them. So again, you still have that emotional component just with a file or a document. And drawings, oh, don't even talk about it. Drawings are even worse. Engineers and legal folks that rely on drawings, they're very scared about turning them into digital drawings. So it's been crazy, and we only are doing one area. So just imagine what it's going to be like as we continue going from area to area. People, they lock up when it's time to make changes and adjustments, but we're going to work through it. And, we just try to be gentle and talk them through it. But it's a very emotional roller coaster because people want to keep their files the way they've always kept them. They don't want to, scan things. They like that paper. So it's a whole bunch of stuff. Yes.
So we are going to then at our next meeting have a high-level introduction to business process modeling, and to help with that and share the documents that we have in place and the examples that we have in place, and also explain how the project team can support these individual efforts. That was a question from Ramona, and I misspelled my answer, but absolutely, yes. So that is pretty much all we had today. And are there any other questions or things that people
Marco
want
has
to?
his hand up. Yeah.
Oh, hi, Marco.
Hey, did you think you're gonna get away without me having something to say? Really?
I was kind of hoping, but I knew that my chances were not that great.
Well, actually, listen, what I wanted to do was shed some light from another perspective, but I think it is extremely important as I intently listened to this. These processes, these business processes, have in common the same kind of challenges around what it means to be implementing and trying to move forward the equity initiative, the equity ordinance of Baltimore City in a city agency and across city agencies, because I do collaborate with colleagues. Now today, fortuitously today, is our equity committee meeting, and we're looking very closely at the equity change groups. And I'm saying all of that to say that there's a paradigm shift in that we are trying to enable the importance of equity at every level of the agency. And so when you're in a place that has a couple thousand employees, and you're in a culture that has been consistently whatever that culture has been across the various divisions. So some are running, some are walking, some are crawling, and some aren't moving at all. So some have gotten out the gate with implementing the equity change groups, which is a process that's going to enable us to glean from these employees at every level information that will help us make decisions at the executive level. And when I'm saying that some are running, some have grabbed the ball and have run with it in establishing those change groups. Others have needed some tutoring, mentoring, and prodding. Others are still trying to understand what they're supposed to do. Others have done absolutely nothing, and some are even resistant because they feel it, again, we're talking about at the supervisory and managerial roles, they're often the block, they're often the wall, they're often the barrier to enabling the change, because they see, oh, these folks don't want to really do that, or they don't think what they are saying matters. Well, but you're their manager, you're their director. We need you to enable what it looks like just moving. And sometimes the shift is very small, but if you don't make any steps at all, we can't move. So we've got all of these different dynamics trying to enable a change, a culture change, a change that is needed to inform and advise executive leadership about its decision making. And so what I'm hearing again is no different here. We've got cultures. And so it takes some time, it takes some patience, and it takes understanding with this. So, encouragement to, I hear Deborah and I hear others, whatever your frustration might be, you are not alone. This is hard work. Change is difficult. And if it's good change, sometimes it's even more difficult, but it also lets you know that you're on to something, that you're actually doing something right. If you don't get resistance, then you may not be doing something so good. So I'm just sharing that for insight and encouragement.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. I receive it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Marco. And if it wasn't at least a little bit difficult, it would be maybe a little bit less fun. But as somebody called Lewis said, this is a good fight. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I do indeed.
And we really need everybody's help. None of us has a full perspective, and you bring, an aspect that's important. I'm not a subject matter expert on that. I know what a little bit, but your help is very, and whatever contribution you can offer and advice will be appreciated, and we'll implement it the best we can. And that it's a group effort, and everybody brings a different. It's like it's like a big band, all right. And somebody brings a saxophone and somebody brings the bass. It'd be kind of a difficult thing if everybody played bass, right? And we had 20.
Left out the piano.
Yeah, all I'm saying, piano is like an orchestra in itself. But if you had 20 basses, I saw a band one that was just like a dozen tubas, and there was not a wide range of music that they could play. You know what I'm saying? So if you got 12 tubas, the number of songs you can play, it may not be that great. So anyway, let's your input is appreciated. Any other voices and thoughts before we close it up, the recording? Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording and